Every morning begins with a ritual that just a couple of decades ago would have seemed like someone's evil, absurd joke. You buy your morning coffee on the way to work, and the barista hands you a paper straw with a dutiful smile. You take a sip, and already after 3 minutes, this piece of cardboard starts to soften, crumple, and leave an unpleasant cellulose aftertaste on your lips. In the evening, you go to the supermarket, where you're forced to pay separately for every thin plastic bag, convincing you that your pennies will somehow magically clean the world's oceans. Returning home, you meticulously sort your trash into 3 or 4 different containers, carefully washing the plastic yogurt tubs before throwing them out. At that moment, you feel like a good, proper citizen. You believe you're doing a good deed, that your minor inconveniences are a necessary sacrifice for the future of our children and the salvation of distant polar bears from inevitable doom. But the official version crumbles as soon as you look a little closer at the hidden mechanisms of this system. Face the truth. This is not an ecological triumph or nature's salvation. This is a large-scale, coldly calculated test of your obedience. This is a global psychological experiment designed to check how easily a person can be made to voluntarily give up basic comfort and pay for what used to be free. Every soggy paper straw in your cup, every bag paid for at checkout, this is a microscopic act of submission. We're simply being trained to accept artificially created deprivations with a smile of moral superiority. Ask yourself, and answer as honestly as possible. At what exact moment did we hand over to transnational corporations and unelected bureaucrats the right to decide how we live? When exactly did we vote for someone in closed, high offices to determine what we drive to work and what temperature to maintain in our own homes in winter? Who gave them the unprecedented power to dictate how many ounces of real meat you're allowed to put on your plate per week, replacing normal food with surrogates? We didn't choose this path and didn't sign this usurious contract. One fine day, we were simply told that we are now lifelong debtors. Debtors to the planet. And this debt, by some amazing coincidence, can be paid only in one way: by giving up your money, your private property, and your fundamental freedoms. We have imperceptibly lost that sense of independence the world breathed just 30 years ago. Back then, a person was the creator of their own destiny. But today we've been turned into criminals by the mere fact of birth. Methodically, day by day, they instill in us the virus of eternal, incurable guilt. You're guilty for breathing and emitting carbon dioxide. You're guilty for wanting to go on a seaside vacation. You're guilty for wanting to buy a reliable car instead of a disposable electric toy. This sense of guilt is the perfect mechanism for controlling the masses. After all, a person who constantly feels guilty will never assert their rights. They will only beg for forgiveness and quietly pay the new fines. The pattern repeats with frightening precision in every corner of the globe. Ecology has long ceased to be a science about protecting the environment and harmony between man and nature. It has transformed into a new, aggressive, and uncompromising religion for the masses. And like any totalitarian sect, it has its unquestionable dogmas, its crying teenage prophets preaching from international podiums, and its modern indulgences in the form of carbon quotas that allow corporations to legally buy off pollution. And for those who dare to ask uncomfortable questions and doubt the sanctity of the green agenda, a modern inquisition awaits. Cancellation, harassment, and the status of enemy of humanity. But the most cynical thing in this story is the behavior of the high priests of this new religion. Take a closer look at those people who, from TV screens, urge you to tighten your belts, give up personal transport, and prepare to eat insects. They don't drink from soggy paper straws. They don't freeze in their apartments to save energy. They fly to countless climate summits on dozens of private jets. One such flight, for a half-hour speech on the harm of exhaust gases, burns more aviation fuel than an average working-class family uses for heating, and trips over 10 or even 20 years. After their pompous speeches, they return to huge super yachts whose diesel engines consume tons of fuel every hour, and head off to colossal mansions that use more electricity than a small district center. This is not care. This is total control, where the rules are written exclusively for slaves, while the masters of life enjoy absolute freedom. If you still believe in coincidences and politicians' good intentions, it's time to finally take off your rose-colored glasses and closely examine how the global architecture of the New World Order is being built. The official version crumbles to dust as soon as you notice the incredible, almost supernatural synchronicity with which governments of completely different countries began tightening the screws. The European Union, the United States of America, and the United Kingdom seem to be reading from the same playbook, written in the inaccessible depths of transnational think tanks and at closed economic forums. Climate laws, initiatives, and the strictest bans are adopted day by day, word for word, as if national parliaments have long lost their real sovereignty and turned into simple, obedient branches of a single global management corporation. This is no longer local initiatives by mayors or governors genuinely concerned about clean air in their home district. This is a flawlessly coordinated, large-scale attack on the basic foundations of a free society. And it is unfolding right now, while our attention is diligently distracted by endless artificial crises and empty scandals in news feeds. They sell us a beautiful, glossy illusion of care for fragile nature, but the real, cold goal of this unprecedented synchronous attack is to create a universal, impenetrable matrix for extracting the last funds from ordinary people. Remember how any classic financial trap works. First, they softly offer you convenience, safety, and world salvation. And when the heavy door finally slams shut, they mercilessly present you with the exit bill. To fully realize the scale of the looming catastrophe, it is enough to look at the real testing ground where this soulless system has already been tested and implemented with frightening, ruthless efficiency. Turn your gaze to London and its so-called ultra-low emission zones. On beautiful embossed paper, and in the sweet speeches of smiling politicians, it sounded like a noble crusade against suffocating urban smog. They painted us pastoral, utopian pictures of the coming future, where happy children carefree run on green lawns, breathing crystal-clear air. But when these draconian laws came fully into force, reality turned out to be incredibly cruel and utterly cynical. The ultra-low emission zones instantly turned into an invisible but tangible wall that divided what was once a unified society into full-fledged rich lords and modern serfs deprived of basic rights. This is a classic, textbook example of how the harshest financial segregation is introduced under loud and bright slogans of universal good. An ordinary person who toiled for decades in factories or on construction sites to buy a modest diesel van or a used family station wagon suddenly found themselves declared outside the law in their own city. Cameras with total license plate recognition were hung at every intersection. And now every time this person turns the key in the ignition to take their children to school or go to the night shift, a soulless electronic system automatically debits a punitive fine from them. This is not just some abstract tax. This is a daily measure of punishment. This monstrous tax on old cars hits exclusively and targetedly at the working class, destroying their already fragile financial well-being. For a multimillionaire, investment banker, or high-ranking top manager of a transnational corporation, this daily environmental fee of several dozen dollars is not even a statistical error. It's absolute, invisible dust.
The rich elites either pay this daily tribute with mild irritation, perceiving it simply as a small fee for the comfortable absence of traffic jams on roads reserved for them, or simply go to a luxury showroom and buy premium, gleaming sports electric cars costing hundreds of thousands of dollars, which are mystically fully exempted by the state from all these environmental obligations. And what is left for a simple builder, a tired nurse, or a plumber to do? They have been coldly presented with an impossible, mocking choice: to give a substantial part of their already meager salary for the right to simply drive down the street, or throw their perfectly reliable gasoline car onto the scrap heap and get into multi-year, suffocating bank loans for the purchase of an authority-approved electric vehicle. And the most terrible thing is that this trendy electric car will never truly become their personal property. It's a complex digital gadget on wheels that a global corporation can remotely disable for failing to pay for the next software update. We are right now becoming silent witnesses to a grandiose historical theft, in the course of which they imperceptibly stole from us the very essence of human independence. Just compare this new, brave world with the world of the past that we so carelessly lost. Just 20 or 30 years ago, a personal car was the absolute, indisputable symbol of personal freedom. It was your sovereign territory, your unconditional ticket to any point on the geographic map. You could get behind the wheel in the middle of a deep night, turn the ignition key, and drive hundreds of miles away, without asking anyone's humiliating permission, without scanning endless digital codes at district borders, and without paying for invented carbon dioxide emission quotas. The car gave an ordinary person real power over their own space. Today, this most important symbol of independence is methodically destroyed to the applause of the deceived crowd. We are being forced to believe the monstrous lie that owning anything is the gravest crime against our planet. The New World Order categorically does not provide for private property for ordinary mortals. The right to free movement now must be humiliatingly rented from corporations. You are no longer the full owner of your fate and your life. You are just a temporary user, a digital slave who must constantly pay subscriptions for basic human freedoms. Ubiquitous car sharing, minute-by-minute rental of electric scooters, public transport with total biometric face recognition. This is not convenient modern urbanism at all. This is total control and a digital cage. To make millions of people enter this invisible cage absolutely voluntarily, and even with a smile, the authorities have carried out a truly virtuoso linguistic substitution of basic concepts. Remember the genius work of the great dystopian writers of the 20th century. They warned us that to fully control thoughts, the language must be changed. Today, we are witnessing this terrible transformation with our own eyes. The harsh, predatory financial levy that deprives families of food is now tenderly called by the soft phrase, environmental fee. The direct, cynical infringement of fundamental constitutional rights and freedoms is masked as touching, tearful care for future generations. The destruction of independent small businesses is presented to naive masses as necessary, sustainable development. When a well-fed official on the TV screen talks about carbon neutrality, he actually means your complete economic zeroing and transition to total dependence on the state. They have seized our dictionaries and perverted meanings so that any normal person who dares to protest against these insane climate taxes looks in the eyes of the brainwashed society not as a fighter for justice, but as a selfish, malicious enemy of living nature. Chills run down the spine of every thinking person who monthly pays utility bills growing in geometric progression
and crystal clearly understands that this is not the salvation of melting glaciers. This is the targeted impoverishment of the masses and the redistribution of wealth in favor of a narrow group of people. Has it ever occurred to you that the most ingenious and most cynical financial scam in human history will be pulled off not with precious metals, not with global oil production, and not even with clever digital currencies, but with the most ordinary air? Ponder this stunning madness. They have literally forced us to pay for emptiness. The mechanism of monetizing air is the pinnacle of corporate greed, where the object of ruthless taxation becomes the very fact of our breathing and existence. Global financial elites have created a colossal speculative market out of absolute nothing by inventing an artificial system of trading carbon dioxide emission quotas. They trade air, shuffling virtual certificates from one bottomless pocket to another, generating billions of dollars in pure profit from the guilt instilled in naive masses. Methodically, day by day, they drum into you that carbon dioxide is absolute world evil, carefully forgetting to mention the basic school biology course, where it is written in black and white that this gas is the fundamental basis for the growth of all plants on our planet. But scientific truth interests no one in the high, closed offices when hundreds of trillions are at stake. This invisible tribute is already carefully embedded in the price of every item on the shelf of your local supermarket, in every kilowatt hour of electricity you pay for, in every gallon of gas at the pump. Chills run down the spine of every thinking person when they suddenly realize that galloping inflation and sky-high prices on basic products are not the result of some random economic crisis, but a targeted, mathematically calculated plan to extract your hard-earned money through an invisible but omnipresent climate tax. If you still naively believe that this is just empty journalistic speculation or theories, look at the dry legal documents that have already been signed and entered into full legal force. Let's take a real, absolutely indisputable fact. The European Union's historic decision to ban the sale of new internal combustion engine vehicles by 2035. Official propaganda declares that this is an incredible historic step toward a green future and the ultimate salvation of melting Arctic glaciers. But let's ruthlessly tear off this beautiful informational packaging and look at the frightening economic essence. What does this draconian law mean for the ordinary person who lives from one modest paycheck to the next? It means a merciless death sentence for affordable, free mobility. When the conveyor production of ordinary cheap cars is completely stopped, prices on used vehicles will inevitably skyrocket to unattainable heights. An average working-class family will never again be able to afford to buy a reliable gasoline station wagon for trips out of town. They will be offered in an ultimatum form to get into a multi-year usurious credit noose for the purchase of a fragile electric vehicle whose battery will inevitably degrade after several years of operation, and its replacement will cost the unfortunate owner a good half of the price of a new car. We are deliberately being deprived of the right to inexpensive movement. But in this harsh, uncompromising law that will destroy the lives of millions of ordinary citizens, there is one stunning, outrageously cynical detail that instantly rips off all the masks from those who wrote it. For elite sports cars, they left a loophole in the form of expensive synthetic fuel, legally impeccably prescribed in the documents. You have absolutely correctly understood this perverted, hypocritical logic of the authorities. You, the simple, powerless taxpayer, must immediately give up your old diesel car, freeze at wind-swept bus stops, and obediently switch to public transport, because your car, supposedly, ruthlessly kills the fragile planet. And millionaires have no intention of giving up the roar of engines on their exclusive supercars and racetracks. They easily and effortlessly pushed through an exception for premium brands, brazenly arguing that their fabulously expensive synthetic fuel is supposedly fully carbon neutral. But the harsh truth is that the incredibly complex process of producing this fuel costs such astronomical amounts of money that it will physically be available only to a narrow caste of chosen deities. This has absolutely nothing to do with real care for the environment. This is the targeted formation of a new feudal society, where the right to burn fuel and move quickly through space becomes an exclusive privilege inaccessible to the masses for the upper class.
And if you still believe that these self-proclaimed saviors of the earth will stop only at destroying your personal cars, you are deeply and tragically mistaken. The most powerful economic and logical pressure is right now shifting to the most sacred, basic, and vital, to what lies on your dinner plate every day. Remember the massive, desperate protests by farmers in the Netherlands in 2022 and 2023, which shook all of Europe for weeks. These were not some spontaneous riots by radical hooligans. This was the sincere, heart-wrenching cry for help from honest workers whom the state machine decided to cynically and coldly destroy. Under the contrived pretext of reducing nitrogen emissions, the government peremptorily adopted a plan that effectively required farmers to kill millions of heads of healthy livestock and forcibly close a third of all operating agricultural enterprises in the country. For decades, the Netherlands had proudly remained the world's second-largest exporter of quality food, yielding in huge volumes only to the United States of America. Their hereditary farmers owned the most advanced, incredibly efficient, and environmentally clean agronomic technologies on the entire planet. But corrupt bureaucrats have no need for food independence and real efficiency. They need 100% total control. People who for generations honestly fed half of the European continent were suddenly declared the main enemies of nature and climate criminals. The government has begun bankrupting independent farms, depriving people of legal licenses, and ruthlessly evicting them from their own ancestral lands, which have been cultivated for decades. Ask yourself this terrifying question: why voluntarily and systematically destroy Europe's most efficient and reliable system for producing healthy food, risking the provocation of a massive famine? The answer is extremely simple and inexpressibly horrifying in its icy pragmatism. The system began destroying the private agrarian sector solely to completely and irrevocably clear the market for corporate synthetic food and insects. An independent farmer with his herd of cows is a colossal threat to the monopoly of total submission being built, because this free person decides for himself what to grow, how to produce, and at what fair price to sell the results of his hard labor. As soon as the fertile land is finally cleared of stubborn private owners, soulless transnational megacorporations will immediately descend upon it. They are already now investing hundreds of billions of dollars in building giant, sterile factories and erecting colossal, frightening plants for the mass production of protein mass. Whoever fully controls uninterrupted food supplies controls humanity itself at the basic, primordial level. You are methodically being deprived of the right to access normal, natural farm meat by artificially creating total shortages and jacking up prices on ordinary beef to astronomical heights. And in return, they condescendingly offer you a cheap patty made from ground larvae, joyfully reporting from TV screens about how you just saved the world. The official version crumbles to dust. The pattern repeats with frightening precision. They are taking away your food independence forever, forcing you to pay corporations for chemical counterfeits. We have reached the most terrifying and climactic point of our investigation. The trap that has been carefully built around us for years
is right now slamming shut with a clang, turning into a monolithic, absolutely impenetrable digital cage. If before you could naively brush off these frightening facts, considering them random overreaches of local authorities or banal bureaucratic errors, then now it's time to look squarely in the face of the real plans of the world's globalists. These grand plans are no longer hidden in deep secret bunkers or whispered about in dark alleys. On the contrary, they announce them with incredible pride and pomp in live broadcasts on the most influential international political and economic platforms. Let's transport ourselves to the World Economic Forum in Davos in 2022. Onto the brightly lit stage steps the president of Alibaba Corporation, and with a disarming, confident smile, presents to the world business elite a project that would make the blood of any sane person freeze in their veins. He openly and enthusiastically announced the creation of an individual carbon footprint tracker for every ordinary citizen on the planet. This innovative technology will, in real time, around the clock, count what exactly people eat, where and on what transport they travel, what specific goods they buy in supermarkets, and how much electricity they consume in their own apartments. The official version shatters into tiny fragments when you fully understand the true purpose of this unprecedented system. This is not just harmless green statistics in a beautiful app on your modern smartphone. This is the reinforced concrete foundation for creating an absolute digital dictatorship, where every one of your actions, every bite of meat on your plate, and every step you take is evaluated by a soulless algorithm. And now let's look closely at how this invisible digital collar will physically and economically restrict your life, depriving you of the last remnants of freedom. The pattern repeats with frightening precision. First, they softly offer you convenience and world salvation, and then harshly deprive you of basic constitutional rights. Let's mention the absolutely real, already existing and tested Swedish Do Black bank card project. At first glance, it's just an ordinary piece of plastic for convenient contactless payments in stores. But inside this high-tech financial tool is embedded an incredibly cruel, uncompromising automatic punishment mechanism. The Do Black card physically blocks your payments and instantly freezes access to your own money if the banking system decides that you have exceeded your strict personal carbon emission limit. You come to the grocery supermarket, try to buy a piece of fresh beef for your family, or pay for an airplane ticket to visit sick relatives. Apply this card to the terminal, and a cold refusal message lights up on the screen. And this terrible event happens not at all because your honestly earned money suddenly ran out on your account, but exclusively because you have exhausted your ecological quota for this current month. You are forcibly and mercilessly disconnected from the world economy. Your access to quality food, winter warmth, and freedom of movement is now irrevocably tied to your ecological rating of civil loyalty. This is not care. This is total control in its purest, most concentrated, and ruthless form. Your private life and your means earned through years of hard labor no longer belong to you. Transnational corporations have gained unprecedented power to leave you absolutely starving and locked in your own home with a single button press. And to ensure you don't even try to escape this cruel system or find any alternative ways around it, the globalists have already, right now, prepared the perfect physical infrastructure for their new world order. We are being incredibly aggressively, with the involvement of the best expensive PR specialists and progressive urbanists, imposed the concept of 15-minute cities. In colorful advertising brochures and glossy TV commercials, they paint an idyllic fairy tale picture of a cozy green neighborhood where modern schools, clean hospitals, farm stores, and quiet parks are within walking distance from your home. Sounds incredibly attractive and caring, doesn't it? But let's ruthlessly brush away this sweet propagandistic syrup and look closely at the real blueprints of this new reality through the prism of harsh laws, endless fines, and the harshest economic restrictions. The 15-minute city is not convenient modern urbanism for the happy and comfortable life of free citizens at all. It is a heavy concrete foundation for future permanent climate lockdowns. Large metropolises are methodically divided into isolated closed zones, the borders of which are tightly equipped with smart cameras for total recognition of car license plates and human faces. You are condescendingly and graciously allowed to walk on foot or pedal a bicycle for free exclusively within your strictly designated sector. But as soon as you dare to cross this invisible border and drive out of your district in your personal car to visit old friends for the weekend, or find a better-paying job in another part of the huge city, you instantly turn into a flagrant violator of climatic tranquility and an enemy of the entire planet. Driving out of your assigned reservation zone in your own car will very soon become an absolutely unattainable, incredibly expensive, paid luxury. For every crossing of your home district's border, precious penalty points will be automatically deducted from your individual carbon tracker, and colossal, unaffordable tolls will be withdrawn from your bank card. If you completely exhaust your meager limit, the electronic system will simply, coldly block your digital pass. You will no longer be put in a classic prison with iron bars on the windows and armed guards, because there is absolutely no practical need for it anymore. Your own native street, your familiar residential area, will finally and irrevocably turn into your personal high-tech prison under the open sky, where artificial intelligence acts as the warden. This monstrous system is being built right under our noses. In Oxford and many other European cities, real, full-scale tests of such harsh, restrictive zones are already being conducted right now, sparking massive, but diligently and thoroughly concealed protests in the official press from locals driven to desperation. Ordinary people are slowly, but very surely, being conditioned to the idea that the natural right to move freely around their own native country is an impermissible, outdated concept from the dark past century. Now you are forever tied to your district, like a completely rightless serf peasant to the land of his powerful feudal lord. The trap finally closes, erecting around us the perfect, invisible cage from which it is physically impossible to break out, because the thick bars of this cage are made not of sturdy iron, but of endless taxes, digital bans, electronic databases, and the guilt complex imposed on all humanity. When you put all these frightening facts together, the official version crumbles completely and irrevocably. It becomes crystal clear that the green agenda being imposed on us has absolutely nothing to do with saving unique nature, protecting dense forests, or cleaning the world's oceans from plastic waste. This is a grandiose, unprecedented in scale operation to save the rapidly dying global financial system. For the last several decades, the world economy has been sustained by the endless printing of unbacked paper money, inflating colossal credit bubbles, and constantly stimulating insane mass consumption. But this vicious mechanism has finally exhausted its limits. The system has reached the edge of the abyss and is ready to collapse under the weight of its own astronomical debts. To maintain their absolute power and preserve the status quo, transnational elites desperately need a completely new, universal, and infinite source of income. They required a new tax from which physical evasion is impossible, and they brilliantly devised to impose a harsh tribute on life itself. The pattern repeats with frightening precision in every country where this plan is implemented. Under beautiful and noble slogans about protecting future generations, the The so-called global reset of the world order is taking place. Before our eyes, the harshest transformation is unfolding, in which humanity is mercilessly being turned from a society of free, independent, and thinking people into a strictly controlled, submissive biological resource. We have been masterfully and methodically instilled with the deepest, paralyzing sense of guilt for the very fact of our existence, for every breath and exhale we take, for every trip to see family, and for every piece of bread on our table. A person crushed by this artificial burden of guilt toward the planet is no longer capable of resisting. They will only silently hand over their last savings, sincerely believing that they are buying themselves an indulgence and the right to simply breathe air. This is not care. This is total control over every second of your life.